In this video, I'm covering 10 numbers every drafter needs to know because being aware of these critical statistics will help you make better decisions so you can win more in your drafts. First, the assumptions are that you are playing a 40 card deck with 17 lands in a conventional 9-8 mana split. So in a black-red deck, you'd be playing something like 9 swamps and 8 mountains. That would be a 9-8 mana split. The 9 sources would be your main color, and the 8 sources will be your secondary color. And then as an additional note, the numbers presented in this video are rounded, so just so you are all on the same page. First, we're looking at the odds of hitting your third land when keeping a 2-land hand. This is an important mulligan decision that comes up all of the time, so knowing the numbers will help you make better choices. Now, the odds of hitting your third land when keeping a 2-lander on the play is 71%, and just so everyone's on the same page, 71% means 71 out of 100 times this is what should happen, which means you should be able to hit your third land pretty consistently, which means that you are oftentimes going to be keeping these 2-land hands on the play, assuming you have early drops, both colors, and are able to deploy those spells, assuming you do hit that third land. Once we look at the odds of hitting your third land on the draw, keeping a 2-lander, it goes all the way up to 85%, which makes this much more of an automatic decision because you're very likely to hit that third land, and oftentimes, as long as you have those early plays, as we already discussed, this is going to be a great hand to keep. Next, looking at the odds of finding your second color. Some opening hands don't have both colors of mana, and so knowing how likely you are to hit your second color by key breakpoints in the game is important. The odds of hitting your main color by turn 4 on the play is 63%. So if you have the 9-8 mana base split we discussed earlier, let's just say you have 9 swamps and 8 mountains. If your opening hand only has mountains in it and you're looking for your main color, the odds of hitting that by turn 4 on the play is 63%, which isn't the greatest odds. So if you have a lot of cards in your main color and you're going to basically lose the game if you don't hit your main color by turn 4, then a lot of the times that will end up being a mulligan. If instead you are on the draw and looking to hit your main color by turn 4, that number goes up to 74% because obviously on the draw you get one extra draw step, and so that means that the odds of keeping that hand are much better for you, and a lot of the times it will be worth it because you are more likely to find that main color. So even if it's a little bit dicey, it's oftentimes going to be a keep because of that extra draw step from being on the draw. If instead you're lacking your secondary color, so for example, in this 9-8 mana base with 9 swamps, 8 mountains, if you just don't have any mountains in your hand, you're only 58% to hit your mountains by turn 4, which means that if your hand is pretty much all red cards or something like that, then you might want to mulligan these hands because you're not going to be able to hit it that consistently. 58%, of course, being better than 50% odds, like more than half the time you're going to get there, but still not a huge margin in that case, because if you don't hit that color, sometimes it's absolutely disastrous. And then if you are on the draw, that number goes up to 69%, which means that you are fairly likely to do it, and so oftentimes that's a much closer decision, and oftentimes you are going to lean towards keeping those hands because being there almost 7 out of 10 times is going to be good enough on the draw in a lot of cases. The next thing to look at is finding your splash. Splashing is a key element of limited, and it's when your mana base doesn't have that conventional 9-8 split, and oftentimes with your splash color, you're going to have 3 sources of a splash color for 1 card. That's a general rule. And if you are following that rule and you have 3 splash sources, the odds of hitting your splash color 14 cards deep into your deck, which is roughly by turn 7, is 74%. So if you want these odds of having pretty consistently able to cast your spells, oftentimes this 70% mark has been an area that we've been looking at. If you want to get to that 74% number, roughly turn 7, that's going to be 14 cards deep into your deck for 3 splash sources. So keeping this in mind, that means that in a quarter of the time, about 25% of the time, you're not going to even be able to deploy your splash card if you, based on the colored sources available in your deck by like turn 7. So you really need to make sure that in the times you are able to cast it, in the games you are able to deploy your splash card, that you are going to be getting that high impact that you need from your splash cards, because not being able to cast your spell at all in a decent chunk of the games is a huge liability. So you need to make sure that when you do cast it, it actively contributes to you winning. It's a card that's good in the late game because even by turn 7, you might not be able to cast it. So you want to make sure that it stays relevant on turns 8, 9, 10, and certainly a card that doesn't fall off a cliff after like turn 4, because if you can't, like, imagine this is by turn 7. By turn 4, the numbers are much lower, and the odds of being able to cast your splash card are get higher over the course of the game. So by turn 4, you're much lower than 74% to be able to cast that splash card. So just keep that in mind when splashing. Make sure it has a high impact, because 74% by turn 7 roughly is still, it's a decent percent chance of being able to cast your card, but there's still going to be games where you can't deploy it. So you need to make sure that it justifies its inclusion in your deck. The next number we're going to look at is double pip versus single pip. So this is a thing that confuses people with the terminology. A double pip card is a card like Murder, which is 1 black black. So double pip refers to the black black in the mana symbol, versus a card like Withering Torment, which does a similar thing to Murder. It destroys a creature, but it only costs 2 and a black. So it's a single pip because there's a single black in that mana cost. Now, the odds of being able to cast a double pip of your main color on turn 4 on the play is 73%. So that's pretty decent odds. That's pretty, like, you're going to be able to do that most of the time. But when we compare that to the odds of being able to cast a single pip of your main color on turn 4 on the play being 95% chance, so that means that out of 20 games, only one of those 20 games in general, you're not going to be able to do it. That's kind of a staggering difference to just think about, where 95% is a heck of a lot better than being in the 70% range. So keep that in mind. Those double pips aren't going to be able to be cast until later. So again, make sure that they are worth their inclusion by being powerful cards to deploy in the late game, and also recognize that you aren't always going to be able to cast them early in the game. So don't rely on them for that particular use case in your deck quite as heavily. The odds of being able to cast a double pip card of your secondary color on turn 4 on the play is only 66%, which is still above 50%. 2/3 of the time you're going to be able to do it. But there is still a large percentage of the time, 1/3 of your games, where you're not going to be able to cast those double pipped cards of your secondary color on turn 4. So imagine you're playing this 9/8 mana base we've been looking at, 9 swamps, 8 mountains. If you have a creature, for example, that's going to cost 1 red or something like that, double pips in red, that you really want to cast on turn 3, even the times where you draw it in your opening hand, when you want to be able to deploy it on turn 3, 1/3 of the time that's not going to work out. So if you are playing double pipped cards, really try to make sure that you are putting the 9 in your 9/8 mana base into the color that has your double pipped cards, because being able to cast them in the early turns of the game is really tricky. And even going on through the game, they're still much less likely. As you saw, the number by turn 4 was 95% for single pipped cards, and the number is just lower consistently across the course of the game for those double pipped cards. The methodology used in this video, where the calculations were done with a hypergeometric calculator. So if you're curious about stats not covered in this video, or you want to examine things out to turn 5 or turn 6 when numbers were only examined for turn 4, then there will be a hypergeometric calculator linked in the description below. But that is going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. And if you made it all the way to the end of the video, remember to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe for more, comment with your questions, thoughts, and feedback, and leave hashtag magic numbers in the comment section down below, because hopefully these numbers will help you win more games of Magic. That's going to do it for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.